Nightmare is such a fascinating creature in Metroid. His backstory and origins is relatively unknown, as they're shrouded in mystery, but the subtle hints and clues we get of Nightmare's story makes him so much more mysterious and yet so much more scary. So for today's episode, I want to explain Nightmare. What's his purpose? Who created him? How does he appear in both Metroid Other M and Metroid Fusion? As well as hopefully clearing up some confusion and misconceptions surrounding this biomechanical monstrosity. So I hope you're prepared to see this ugly face a lot, cause we're gonna get started. The general backstory of Nightmare has never really been explored in any of the Metroid games. We don't really know who specifically created him, when he was created, or even what creatures he's based off of. We do know that according to the Adam AI during Metroid Fusion, that Nightmare is indeed a bioweapon. To quote, "Apparently, it was a biomechanical organism designed for military applications." Saying that Nightmare chronologically first appears at the Bottle Ship, a research facility that was secretly developing bioweapons for the Galactic Federation, it stands to reason that Nightmare was developed aboard the Bottle Ship. Now during Other M, Samus encounters Nightmare as she's making her way towards the bottle ship's restricted sector, within a room with a structure that looks suspiciously like the gravity suit icon. Nightmare is left hidden and restrained as he's left hanging from the ceiling, but for whatever reason, Nightmare breaks free from his restraints and immediately starts attacking Samus. Nightmare starts off his attacks by amplifying gravity to slow down his target, as he shoots beams and energy blasts from his arms, as well as violently thrashing towards his target. His weak point is his face mask, but with the amplified gravity, all projectiles are now useless as they're drawn towards Nightmare's gravity manipulator, making him practically invincible. Seeing how effectively Nightmare immobilizes his foes with gravity and with his laser attacks and physical attacks, it's easy to see how effective of a weapon Nightmare can be. Too bad for Nightmare though, he's fighting against Samus, a character who has experience living on a planet with amplified gravity, as well as having the power suit. So she wasn't completely immobilized, as well as there being a fatal flaw with Nightmare's gravity manipulator. Since it attracts all projectiles, it attracts Samus's ice beam, causing it to freeze over and temporarily become disabled, allowing Samus to fire at his face mask, and thus damaging Nightmare. After enough damage, the face mask breaks off, revealing a baby-like face? Now I know it's jarring for this supposed bioweapon to have a baby-like face and cry, especially when you compare him to his next appearance in Metroid Fusion. To many, it ruined Nightmare's reputation of being a horrifying monster, although his baby-like appearance does imply that he was built relatively recently around the events of Other M, since he seems to be as young as a baby. On top of that, Nightmare being a baby gives this history a little bit of a cruel twist. Nightmare is a baby forced into this life of experimentation. All he knows is destruction, pain, augmentation, and overall how to be a weapon. The Galactic Federation's desire for bioweaponry has led them to experimenting on a baby, giving the Galactic Federation a more heartless and cruel twist to them. It kinda makes me feel sad for Nightmare. It makes his boss seem a little bit more complex than just a mindless monster. Anyways, so after Nightmare's mask breaks off, his cybernetics and gravity manipulators malfunction. Nightmare's gravity manipulators backfired, causing him to be tossed and thrown around, and then left unconscious, allowing Samus to continue on in her journey. Although this isn't the last time we see of Nightmare. As Samus backtracks through Nightmare's room, Nightmare regains consciousness and starts to attack Samus again. It's obvious that Nightmare hasn't recovered from the last fight, as it seems that Nightmare struggles to stay up, as well as sparks coming out of his cybernetics. Nightmare's tactics are pretty similar to the first fight, but with Nightmare's exposed face, Nightmare can now shoot lasers from his mouth, as well as generating mini black holes to attract projectiles away from Nightmare, showing that he is smart enough to adapt from previous encounters. Again though, since Nightmare was fighting Samus at a weakened state, as well as Samus acquiring her gravity function for her suit, Nightmare didn't stand much of a chance. After enough damage, Nightmare's cybernetics break off. With his arms, tail, and gravity manipulators broken, it's left incapacitated for the remainder of the game. Nightmare's next appearance would be in Metroid Fusion, and this has caused a little bit of confusion. How did Nightmare go from the bottle ship to the biological space laboratories? Didn't Nightmare get destroyed in that explosion of the bottle ship? Are there multiple Nightmares? To explain how Nightmare appears in Metroid Fusion, we gotta talk about Other M's post-game. During Other M, after Nightmare and Ridley are both defeated, their bodies are left intact for the remainder of the main game. During the post-game, however, if you were to explore where the bodies were left, you'll notice that they're missing. But since we do know that Ridley's body and Nightmare reappear in the BSL, it's implied that the Galactic Federation returned to recover some assets and items, like the bodies of Nightmare and Ridley, before the bottle ship was scheduled to be destroyed, and transferred them over to the BSL. This is how Nightmare appears in the BSL. Comparing the state Nightmare was left in during Other M and how he appears in Metroid Fusion, we see that the scientists aboard the BSL repaired Nightmare and kept him safely secured in Sector 5. When the X-Parasite outbreak happened during the game's events, Nightmare seems to have been safely quarantined from the X-Parasites. There was no sign of Nightmare at all, but once Samus entered Sector 5 to unlock level 3 security locks, Nightmare became active, as it's seen flying in the background of Sector 5. At the time, there was no reason for Samus to take on Nightmare, since she had other priorities like trying to handle the X-Parasite outbreak. It isn't until later in the game where eventually Nightmare would get infected by an X-Parasite, becoming Nightmare X, and becoming a genuine threat for Samus and the BSL. Nightmare X was causing some random rampage and chaos, causing an explosion in Sector 5, getting the Adam AI's attention and informing Samus that Nightmare X is a huge threat and must be taken on. Eventually, Samus would find the electronic graveyard, where Nightmare would eventually show himself. Very similarly to the battle in Other M, Nightmare X would kick off the battle by amplifying gravity in an attempt to slow down his opponent and make sure most projectiles won't be able to touch him, while at the same time bombarding the opponent with a barrage of missiles. Although for whatever reason, Nightmare's gravity amplifier doesn't really affect lasers, it only affects physical missiles, allowing Samus to spam her beams at the gravity manipulator, destroying it for the rest of the fight. Although something seems to be off about Nightmare in this battle. As Nightmare gets damaged, you can see that his face mask is slowly oozing and dripping out fluids. And he seems to be much more stiff and slow as he floats around, as opposed to his more active and aggressive patterns in Other M. Of course, with Nightmare X's gravity manipulator being destroyed, Nightmare can no longer amplify gravity, meaning he can only rely on his beam weapons as well as ramming into Samus to do damage. Of course, just like in Other M, Nightmare's main weak point is his face mask, and as Samus does more damage to the face mask, more and more liquids and fluids ooze out of the eye sockets, eventually destroying the face mask and revealing a much more grotesque, borderline rotten face. It's such a horrifying sight, and it gets even worse. As Samus does more damage to the body, more of the face starts to rip apart and corrode, as if the body's been rotten this whole time. It's almost as if Nightmare is a zombie, forced in motion by the cybernetics surrounding his body. As the cybernetics break off, his body starts corroding and falling apart. It kinda makes sense also when you think about it. In Other M, Nightmare was just left alone for such a long time in the bottle ship, no real way to heal himself or to get help from any scientists to repair him. He probably died by the time the Galactic Federation gathered his body, but now he's revived by the scientists of the BSL, held together by cybernetics and forced in motion by an X-Parasite to cause chaos and destruction. It's a really cool thought, but similar to how Nightmare's baby-like appearance in Other M implies that he could be a child, Nightmare's appearance during Other M only seems to imply that he could be dead. After Nightmare X takes enough damage, his body breaks apart, revealing the X-Parasite that was controlling him inside, the X-Core. X-Parasites have a very unique ability of absorbing memories, knowledge, and even abilities from their hosts. And it seems that this X-Parasite was able to absorb Nightmare's ability of manipulating gravity. When Samus defeats the X-Core and absorbs the X-Parasite within it, she gains the fusion gravity suit, which seems to imply that the technology that Nightmare uses for his gravity manipulation might be somehow connected to the Chozo technology that Samus uses for her gravity manipulation with the gravity suit. But with Samus absorbing the X-Parasite that infected Nightmare, this marks the end of Nightmare's story, since we see Samus outright destroy Nightmare's body during the events of this game. But that's Nightmare's story. So, what do you guys think? Did you enjoy this video? Did you learn something new? Did you like or not like the interpretations of Nightmare in between Other M or Fusion? Whatever your opinion is, feel free to leave it in the comment section below. I find Nightmare such a fascinating character to look into in Metroid. His background and story is like, you know, just unknown and mysterious, but the little hints and details like him looking like a corpse in Fusion or him looking like a baby during Other M kinda has some neat implications, honestly, and it's just cool to look into. I don't know if I want Nightmare to return again for the third time in the series, but I wouldn't mind if like in a future game or like in a prequel we get like little like hints of Nightmare existing, like maybe like a document we can like scan or something, or like have a screen show him in progress of being made. That'd be really cool, but yeah, I don't know. Kind of afraid if we overuse Nightmare too much, it kind of ruins his mystery and appeal, so we'll see if he ever returns in one way or another in the future. But if you do enjoy this video, please feel free to share this video amongst all your friends, like the video, and if you like my Metroid content, feel free to subscribe. And if you have other suggestions for for other creatures, entities, items, locations in the Metroid series you want explained, feel free to leave it in the comment section. Whether it's something as big and important like Dark Samus or the Queen Metroids, or maybe something more obscure and just unknown like maybe the Acid Worm from Zero Mission, or the Berserker Lords from Prime 3. Or if you want more Metroid lore, feel free to click on the video and the playlist above. It's a video where I explain Mecha Ridley and his story. Or maybe if you don't want lore and just want more general Metroid goodness, maybe watch my unboxing video of the Metroid ARM canon. With that being said, I'm the Metroid Trainer. Hope you like, favorite, subscribe, stick around for next time, cause I'll be seeing you later.